Okay, so it's 12:01, so we're going to go ahead and get started so we can make the most of our time. I want to introduce Cynthia Treasure. She's going to go over mental wellness today, and I'm going to have her give her own bio or whatever, but I'm really super excited because this is the second month in a row we're actually doing something on mental wellness and trying to make sure we can come up with different ideas of how to handle our mental situations of what's going on. I know everybody is working with less people, and we still have more work to do. So I want to make sure if you're not muted already, could you please mute yourself? We want to make sure we're really respectful to our speaker, and I'm going to let her go ahead and get started. So once again, please mute yourself if you have not already, because there's several people that are unmuted. Please mute yourself, and I'm going to turn the platform over to Miss Cynthia.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be able to talk to everybody about mental health, accessing mental health services, and my attention will definitely get pulled. I think I can mute people. I'm just gonna go around and mute. Okay. So a little bit about me. I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor. I'm licensed here in Ohio, and then I'm also licensed in Oregon. And I've been in the world of mental health, oh God, I'm afraid to say for how long. I think it'll give away my age. We'll just say for a very long time, for close to 20 years. And I given the opportunity to talk about mental health and how important it is so exciting to me, because in the line of work that I've done for many years, my focus has been mainly on treating trauma and working with family systems. And I've been able to see how it affects so many people. So my bio's on the flyer. I don't want to get too much into that. If you have any questions or would like to learn more, I'm happy to share. But today I was asked to, is it okay, Jamila, if I just kind of segue into, okay.
Absolutely.
I was asked to come and talk about mental health and stigma, how those can work together. And then we will also segue into advocating for self and connecting to services, some of the barriers that people can sometimes encounter as they're trying to connect to services. And then I also wanted to supply some really good resources that people can use to help support yourself, because life gets hard. And I think, Jamila, you said it perfectly, like there's work shortage happening, and the work itself is not in shortage. So the additional stressors on all of us, everything that everybody's been through the last few years, on top of the fact that life can just be hard. So mental health is just so important to talk about. And I'm very passionate about it. So I'm very excited to talk to everybody. So I don't want this to be a death by PowerPoint. I really don't, but I also want to be able to help organize the information that I'm giving. I know visuals can be helpful, and I don't want to be talking at you, for the next 30 or so minutes. So I am going to share my screen. Full disclosure, I use Teams. I've never shared a screen on Zoom. So here we go. Fingers crossed. Let's see if this works. Let me know if I think I was successful. Yes,
yes, it works.
All right. Okay. So I titled it Mental Health, Finding the Help You Need, and also understanding stigma and destigmatizing mental health, because we have to understand what gets in the way and then how to kind of work through that so that people have better access to services. I tried to make it fun with like colors and things like that. Let's see, did it let me share? Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to really start with when we're talking about mental health, I think it's important just to understand the reality in which we live in terms of how prevalent mental illness is. Nearly 50 million Americans experience mental illness. It's important to note that this is just what's reported, and it is vastly underreported. So this number is very low in comparison to what the reality is. And if we're looking at mental illness, it's important to recognize that it is a health condition. It is a health condition. It's not something that somebody is choosing or a weakness of character. It is just like any sort of other illness. And so as we talk more about stigma, remembering that it's just another illness is a part of destigmatizing that. But mental illness, for it to be considered something that registers as like can be diagnosed, it has to involve a change in emotion, how somebody's feeling. It involves a change in how a person is thinking, how they're acting, and oftentimes it's a combination of all of those things. Feeling overwhelming emotion, not feeling like we're able to control the way in which we're thinking or how we're acting, and all of those combined causes us distress that impacts how we can function in our daily life, at work, at home, with friends, our day-to-day, our daily day tasks. And the next thing I included is just a list of common mental disorders or illnesses, generalized anxiety disorder, major depression, post-traumatic stress disorder. I'm not going to read them all out loud. The reason I included this here is because I think it shows, and my goal was to have this show all the different ways that mental illness can look, and that it's so prevalent that we actually have specific diagnoses. And in order for something to be diagnosed, it has to be common enough to where, the experts of the field have categorized common symptoms and certain criteria. So it's not just a couple people have experienced this, like this is prevalent. So my hope in showing that is just recognizing all the different ways that mental illness can present and affect people, and all the different symptoms, because those with mental illness often feel like there's something wrong with me or something broken about me. And that is not the case. Like, it's just symptoms that people experience, and it can present in many different ways. So we kind of have that overview of just mental illness in a nutshell. And the real focus that I wanted to talk today is mental health stigma, because I think so many people are afraid to acknowledge if they're struggling, if they're feeling like they are having a hard time, because people are afraid, oh, if I acknowledge this, then people are going to think less of me or different of me. And that's a real barrier to people getting care. And it also contributes to symptoms. So we're going to break down what stigma is and all the impacts of stigma. So stigma, it's a negative attitude and belief about mental illness, and those that it affects. And stigma is really born out of a lack of understanding, a lack of knowledge about what mental health really is. So hopefully today we are all taking part in breaking stigma. And there are different types of stigma. So one type of stigma that people experience is stigma from the public, of just overall the people outside of ourselves and how we feel society views mental health. And that might be public stigma, can look like, I'm going to mute this person. Boop. Can look like, oh, people with mental illness, they're dangerous, they're lazy, they can't be trusted, they're not smart. All of that is misinformation about mental illness. People with mental illness are usually, by and large, not dangerous, are not lazy, can be trusted, are intelligent. Like, mental illness has nothing to do with that. Media plays a huge role in lack of showing appropriate demonstrations of mental illness. And I think a perfect example that just kind of popped into my head, the movie The Joker. I'm a huge Batman fan, and I also love Joaquin Phoenix. So this is no slam on the movie The Joker, but that's kind of a great media representation of like how we're going to show somebody struggling with mental illness, and that he was so dangerous and so most people, that is not all mental illness. But when you look at how mental illness is really portrayed by and large by media, it really goes and pushes and supports this stigma by the public about mental illness. There's also self-stigma, and this is our internal dialogue. If a person is struggling with mental illness, they're walking around and holding their own stigma. And so this might sound like, I'm worthless, I'm stupid, I'm dangerous, I'm to blame for what I'm going through. And that's huge and heavy. So not only is this person already experiencing mental illness, but now they're walking around also experiencing this self-stigma that they're holding that is going to actually contribute to the symptoms they're already experiencing. And then you have institutional stigma. And this is the laws and policies that are often put into place around mental illness. I think the best kind of example of this might be like military. A lot of military people are afraid to vocalize if they're struggling about mental illness. There might be different rules and certain things like, oh, if you're struggling with depression, then you can't be deployed, or we have to remove, you can't do this job. So there's certain laws and policies that also foster mental health stigma. And so I thought it was really pertinent to add, because of this stigma, more than half of people with mental illness don't receive treatment. So this is just such an important concept, and I really hope that us meeting today can be a step into just hopefully furthering breaking down the stigma, because if we can break down mental health stigma, more people will feel free to voice what they're struggling with and to allow themselves to have access to mental health treatment. Okay. So kind of covered a little bit of this already. Why is discussing stigma important? It impacts somebody's willingness to seek treatment. If I feel like I'm going to be judged, if I feel like those, people around me know I'm going to treatment, they're going to think I'm lazy or crazy, or there's something wrong with me, I'm not going to seek treatment. It's hurtful to relationships. And this is kind of twofold. If I'm experiencing or I'm afraid to get treatment because of stigma, so I don't get treatment, my symptoms likely are going to continue to get worse. And remember that mental illness affects our relationships. So my symptoms get worse, it impacts my relationships more. There's a breakdown of interpersonal relationships because I'm not accessing treatment. The other way that stigma impacts relationships is that it might be I'm vocalizing that I need help, and those in my relational circle aren't supporting that I'm, needing treatment, or are saying some of that stigma from before, oh, you just need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps or something like that. And that can be so damaging, to not feel understood, to not feel respected, to just not feel heard, and to be thought that, there's a blame on this. That's going to be hurtful to a relationship. Discrimination, it impacts work and other opportunities. Some jobs might be looking at that and saying, okay, because there's this mental illness, you don't have this offer, or this opportunity isn't available to you. It impacts self-worth. Again, if I'm walking around thinking like I'm to blame for this, and there's just something wrong with me, and I'm just like a bad person because I struggle and I feel depressed, my whole self as a person is going to feel crumply, and that's going to actually destroy my worth and how I feel about myself. And all of that segues into increasing the symptoms and mental illness that are already there, and often leads to more mental illness. So some additional impacts of stigma. There was a 2017 study, and you can see I have these little links. So at the very end, I have my resources if anybody wants to do some further reading. But there was a 2017 study that showed that people with higher levels of self-stigma were linked with poor recovery from their mental illness. So not only does stigma act as a barrier to somebody accessing services, but if they're holding a lot of stigma, if they're experiencing a lot of stigma from the public, and they have a lot of that self-stigma, that even if they allow themselves to seek services, that is going to impact how effective or the prognosis of that treatment will be. So it's really huge. There's less motivation to continue treatment. It impacts the support of mental health services. This is a big one that we are seeing right now pretty significantly. Funding for mental health, depending on how different institutions and agencies see mental health and how they're funding it and how they're supporting it. If there's a lot of stigma around it, oftentimes that support isn't what it should be. Increasing housing barriers. We see this a lot with our supported housing or people trying to seek housing. Sometimes, especially with supportive housing, people might not want to build certain housing complexes, or landlords are like, oh, I don't want to rent to people that might exhibit mental illness. So having mental illness be a housing barrier is awful, because housing is a basic need. It increases feelings of helplessness, and stigma also increases harassment, violence, and bullying. So all of these components go into stigma, which is, just shows how important it is to recognize the stigma of mental health and the importance of fighting against it. So I made this little circle because I thought it really showed how stigma feeds off of itself. So you encounter mental health stigma, it goes in and actually increases somebody's mental health symptoms, which often leads to less opportunities, poor relationships, inadequate mental health support, which then leads to lack of services, which all that continues with increasing somebody's symptoms, furthering less opportunity. So it's this negative feedback loop. So, breaking this cycle of stigma, I think you can see how imperative it is. And it's something that we all can do, which I have in my next slide, battling stigma. So, first and foremost, the thing that everybody can begin doing to begin breaking down mental health stigma is speaking and sharing openly about mental health. And if somebody is speaking about their experience, if they're sharing about what they're struggling with, hear that person's story in a non-judgmental way. Allow yourself to be witness to lived experience in an open, non-judgmental, caring way. And if you feel brave enough to be able to speak out about what you've experienced, that breaks it down. And I can start right now in sharing that I have struggled with anxiety my whole life. It's something that I've had to learn is a part of my life, and ways to cope with it and battle back with it, and to live a happy, effective, well-rounded life with major anxiety disorder. I think it's made me a better therapist myself, because I really understand what it's like to be anxious, to experience a panic attack, how it affects daily living. And there's things that happen in the brain around anxiety. I have good friends who struggle with major depression. One of my best friends struggles with bipolar disorder, and how that impacts her and her relationships. She's also a therapist. Fun fact, a lot of therapists become therapists because of the help that we've received. And that's why I think it can be so effective to find a really good therapist, because you will often feel really understood, because they really understand what it's like. further educating yourself about mental health. There are some amazing, oh, I thought I put this on mute. There's some amazing blogs on mental health. There's articles, podcasts, books. The more you can educate and equip yourself with knowledge around mental illness, goes such a long way. Knowledge is power, right? In breaking the cycle of stigma. And being aware of your language. This is so important. You'll notice that I didn't say like, instead of like if somebody's struggling with, let's say depression, you would just say like they're struggling with depression. They're not depression, right? So I have experienced anxiety. I am not anxiety. And that helps separate the person from what they're experiencing from being labeled as their mental illness. Also saying, you know, calling people crazy or insane, those sort of words are really hurtful. So being aware of our language and how we are labeling things is so important. And how we talk about mental illness is really important, because a person is not their mental illness. That's just something that they're experiencing, but that is not who they are. Showing compassion. If those of you that have experienced a mental illness, you know it is hard. At the very beginning, you know, I outlined that it affects our emotions, it affects our thoughts, it affects our functioning, the behavior, our relationships, what we do at work. It is hard. So showing compassion to those who are struggling, so needed. And normalizing mental health treatment. I should have like made this blank, is pivotal. Nobody bats an eye when they say, I have to go to the doctor. Something's going on with my knee. My knee's really hurting. There's no judgment when somebody's like, oh, I have to go see my doctor. They're like, yeah, go see your doctor. Of course you have to go see your doctor. And that's the push that we should ideally be seeing change in mental illness of like, yeah, go see your therapist. Like, yeah, you're really struggling with, you've been feeling down, things you used to enjoy, you're not enjoying anymore. Some like seeing a therapist or acknowledging that you're struggling emotionally or with certain thoughts and that you're going to go seek help for that should have the same feeling as somebody seeking help for a physical illness or disorder. It is the same thing. An illness is an illness. And then choosing empowerment and owning your own story. While anxiety has definitely at times made my life harder, it has brought me a sense of recognizing my own resiliency. It has made me a more compassionate person. It is a part of my story and I would not change it. And so when we can begin to incorporate and feel empowered through our story instead of feeling like it's something that we have to have shame over, that is huge. So we have ways to fight back against stigma. And now we're going to be looking at overcoming the barriers of stigma, because while stigma is slowly starting to break down, it is very much a reality of what exists in society today. And it's not just in the US, it's worldwide. So there's stigma, mental health is prevalent. The first thing to know and to give yourself permission to do, even though stigma is present, is to allow yourself permission to seek treatment. This is so huge. Even though things are hard, sometimes we have to do hard things. So giving yourself permission to recognize there are times in my life or times in the lives of the loved ones, of my loved ones, where they might need more help. Great. Be supportive to yourself and to others so that that treatment can be accessed. Encourage others in need to connect with treatment instead of judging or saying, oh, this is just a phase. What a better way of saying, like, it sounds like you're really struggling. Maybe talking with a professional about that would be really helpful so you can get the support you need, and letting people know I fully support you in doing that. Joining a support group. I have some links towards the end of this presentation of ways to kind of connect with support groups. You can also, look in your local community or local agencies for support groups as well. I'm gonna take a drink of water real quick. Saying yes to self-care. Self-care is a big bling word right now, I know. And there's so many versions of what self-care mean. I think a lot of people have this image of self-care being going to a spa or, meditating on a rock out in the middle of the wilderness. But self-care can be prioritizing certain tasks that you're wanting to do so that you can feel accomplished and organized. Self-care can be saying no to certain things because maybe it's not right for you, or maybe you need a day of rest. Self-care can be, going for a hike and sitting out on that rock and looking out over a beautiful view. It can be a bubble bath or doing yoga. Self-care can also be, I'm going to give myself permission tonight to turn on my favorite show on Netflix and have some strawberry shortcake, which I actually have planned for myself tonight. So I'm going to use that example. So self-care encompasses so much. And I think in order for self-care to be effective, again, we're having to give ourselves permission to listen to our own needs. And sometimes those needs come with boundaries on others. I could spend probably a whole day on self-care and boundaries. So try out new methods of support. If you're not one who has typically reached out for help or allowed yourself to have help from others, maybe find, and this kind of connects with the one below of connecting with supportive relationships, reaching out and talking with somebody that is a safer person in your life. A new method of support, some of the different resources that I have later on in this PowerPoint, maybe check it out, check out that app or go onto that website, go to, a group, allowing yourself access to something that you haven't done before, giving yourself permission to doing it and recognizing that there is nothing wrong with doing that. There's nothing wrong with taking care of yourself, of acknowledging when you're having a hard time or you're struggling with something, and then allowing that additional support and help for yourself. So yeah, trying it out. I reached out because I know those here today are city employees. So I wanted to find out more about what support the city of Dayton offers. And I found out that your mental health coverage, your insurance is through Anthem, which is really fantastic. Anthem has really good coverage. There's no visit limitations to a mental health provider, which is also fantastic. I will tell you, not all insurances have that. Some insurances you have to kind of have a pre-approval of like, okay, we'll approve 12 sessions. And then if you need more, your therapist will have to request additional sessions. There's no limit for Anthem, which is phenomenal. And then I was also given some additional resources that your insurance provides. They have additional access to behavioral health services through Live Health Online and the Sydney app. And so I went on and looked more on that Sydney app, and I have never used it because I'm not a City of Dayton employee, but it looked really cool. The Sydney app will let you, if you download it, you can connect with a mental health provider. You can also do this at anthem.com, and it allows you to connect with the mental health support from home through telehealth, which can be really convenient. Just make sure you have a secure location where you have some privacy. The sessions are secure. Most telehealth platforms now are HIPAA compliant because COVID and having to do things remote, therapists have gotten really good at being able to reach people in different forms, in office, computer, phone, all of that. And then it also offers psychiatric support, which is really phenomenal. So you all have access to this. And because you have Anthem, I also just wanted to let you know that Samaritan Behavioral Health, who I work with, so I'm a program director here at Samaritan Behavioral Health in one of our outpatient programs. we take Anthem. So if maybe telehealth wasn't your jam, and you wanted to see somebody in person, awesome, possum. We take Anthem as well. A lot of providers take Anthem. So even if you're not feeling Samaritan, you can call your insurance and they should be able to give you a list of, these are the providers that Anthem takes, or you can just call somebody and say like, hey, do you take Anthem? And they should be able to tell you that. And then we have 3 offices, one in Dayton, and then I included the crisis number for Montgomery County. We have an office in Miami County, and then below that is the crisis number for Miami County. And then we also have an office in Preble County, and then that's the crisis line for Preble County. And Samaritan also does substance use disorder treatment through 115. I provided the phone number there. They do detox stabilization, they have sober living, they have intensive inpatient, they have outpatient, and then we have really good coordination of care between 115 and Samaritan. So I can speak about this again just because I'm a program director here at Samaritan, but I will say wherever you reach out to, making sure you feel connected with your therapist is so pivotal. And I don't care if that's at Samaritan or it's another agency. The important thing is if you are feeling like you need more support or you're struggling with something, that you feel like who you're going to is somebody that you can openly talk to and share openly. Not every therapist is the perfect fit for a person, and that is totally fine. In session with individuals in our first session, I would often tell people that of like, if you don't feel that safe and connected with me as we meet, I would much rather you say something so I could connect you with somebody that you might feel connected with. The therapeutic relationship is not about the therapist. It is not about, oh, this person didn't feel connected with me. Oh no, it's like, no, my personality just wasn't a good fit. That's totally fine. I would so much rather somebody say something so that they can be connected with somebody that they do feel is a better fit for them. And any therapist worth their weight is going to feel that. The therapeutic relationship is not about the therapist. It is about that person across from us. And we always want what is best for that person across from us. So, so here's some additional resources. And there's the links here. So I'll be sending this to Jamila. And if anybody wants this, she can send out and you can go to these links and check it out. I wanted to include the Adamus board. This is for Montgomery County. Every county has a mental health and recovery board. I included the one for Montgomery County because this is for Dayton city employees. If you're outside of the city in Dayton, you can just click on mental health board in the county that you do live in, and it will show you what your mental health board is. And this is a great place to check out if you're wanting to find local resources and treatment options. So that's a good resource for finding more information. And then I included our own website, SBHI Help, and that has more information about the resources that are available in all the different counties that I showed that we serve and all the different programs and things like that. NAMI is phenomenal. So I included NAMI Ohio. NAMI stands for the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And when you go to NAMI, I will warn you, you might feel a little bit overwhelmed just because there is so much information there. But I will tell you the information on NAMI is phenomenal. They have information on support groups, many of those like virtual support groups, a ton of information on treatment options, fantastic resources for children and youth, crisis information. They have specific information for different populations, including veterans, LGBTQIA. There's resources on NAMI for those experiencing domestic violence or abuse and, shelters. There's just so much information on NAMI. So that's a great resource to check out. And then I also wanted to include SAMHSA, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration. SAMHSA also has a bunch of resources. These are a little bit more focused on substance use disorders, but substance use disorder is a part of mental illness, absolutely. And so if you need help locating providers and treatment options, treatment options, kind of more tailored to addiction and substance use, SAMHSA is a really good place to look for that. They have information on there as well on crisis information and addiction programs. Psychology Today is a nice resource. If you're looking more for like a private practice provider or wanting some more articles about mental illness, I love Psychology Today. Something that I think is fun about, maybe fun isn't the right word, helpful about Psychology Today is that you can enter in the specific thing you're struggling with, or perhaps you're wanting to find a provider who provides a specific treatment. Like maybe you're really wanting some neurofeedback or dialectical behavioral therapy or a cognitive behavioral therapy specialist, EMDR, whatever it is. You can go on there and select like the treatment options that you're looking for, and it will populate providers in your area that have selected that's the type of therapy that they provide. You could also put in what you're struggling with, and it'll be the same thing. These therapists work with this set of symptoms. So I think that's really nice site to look for if you're looking for something really specific. And verywellmind.com, I stumbled upon them a few months ago, and I loved it. It's a list of top rated mental health apps of 2022. This list is comprised of independently researched, tested, and reviewed apps specifically focused on mental health. Important to note, these are not intended to replace the work of, working with a professional therapist, but these are fantastic options if there are barriers that you're encountering to accessing a mental health provider. Honestly, right now, I know it can be really tricky finding a mental health provider. The state of mental health work, kind of because of what I was talking about earlier with stigma and lack of funding. I don't want to be dramatic, but it feels like a little bit, there's a little bit of a mental health crisis in the sense of there's workforce shortage. And I know a lot of people are trying to reach out for mental health providers, and they're coming up against being told, I'm sorry, we're not accepting new patients right now. I'm sorry, we're full. They're leaving messages. They're not getting called back. There's a real need. And so I hope everybody hears in this the need of mental health and how many people are struggling. So if you are struggling with mental health symptoms, hear me. You are not alone. And it is such an issue that the mental health world is having a hard time keeping up. So break that stigma. Hopefully we can fund mental health in a better way so that the needs of those with mental health struggles can be met, because it's very real. So the apps and the support groups, I think, can be a really great supplemental thing to add to your toolkit just to help in coping, especially if maybe you have found an agency or you have found a provider that's open, but maybe you're not able to see them for a month or two because the wait list is out. Check out some of these apps because it can really help the in-between. And then I included some of the resources just in case there are fellow nerds among me who like reading about this. So I included those in here. Some of the information that I put in here is just from my own knowledge, and so I didn't cite that because it's just kind of coming from me. I will stop sharing my screen. Let me see, how do I stop sharing my screen?
At the very top, it should say something like stop sharing. It's a little red button next to
Oh, right there, the giant
Oh.
red button with the stop sign.
No, that's
Yeah.
fine.
There it is. So that's everything that I compiled. So I would love, Jamila, I don't know if there's opportunity
Oh,
for
absolutely. We actually have 20 minutes left, so this will be a perfect opportunity for people to ask any questions that they might have. First of all, Cynthia, thank you for touching bases. The biggest thing, I have one question, but
yes.
the biggest thing with what's going on right now, and you've already touched on it, the short staffing. We have an EAP program, and they were about 2 to 3 weeks out from seeing people. And so that's the first thing. I used to go to grief counseling with my EAP person, and she actually retired in February. So I haven't had a grief person since then. So, and because of the delay in having our therapist over there, I haven't gotten anybody else. So
Okay.
I can personally say that because I'm pretty open about that. And the people that I've lost since 2008, I probably lost about 17 members of my family. So that's how serious that was, to the point where I personally needed grief counseling. But thanks for bringing that up. But as for the support groups, do you know if any of those support groups meet virtually? Because that's something that I would like to maybe get out to the community, the city community, and make sure that they know that that is available. I didn't know that they did have support groups around still for at least mental health and to talk about the type of things that people are going through.
Absolutely. And I just want to shout out, Jamila, like you just contributed to breaking stigma by thank you for just openly sharing. And I am so sorry to hear that you've had so much loss over the last year. There's grief. That's all. I don't have words.
It happens, and it's more often than not. And all of my stuff happened before COVID, so that was just one of the things that's been ongoing with our family and stuff like that. But I want to open this up at this time for any questions. Is here to ask. If you do not want to turn on your actual voice, please do type it in the box. This is a perfect opportunity to ask any questions. She gave us plenty of resources to use, and especially if you have questions concerning that.
And there are a lot of those groups, Jamila. There's a lot of telehealth options.
Okay.
So by video, which is wonderful, including substance use disorder groups.
Okay. Norma, I see you raised your hand. So can you, you already unmuted. Go ahead and ask your question.
Yes, hi. So I heard you talk a lot about the therapy aspect, but not from the actual psychiatry aspect. And I am I have experience with mental illness, not from having suffered from a mental health condition, but from being a family member of someone with a mental health condition, which is a whole nother set of issues. And, particularly when you're dealing with someone that is an adult, that's emancipated, that can be extremely difficult trying to navigate and to help. But one of the things that I've experienced, and it's not even Montgomery County, I'm just wondering if generally speaking, is in even finding a private psychiatrist, because it appears, unfortunately, that the reimbursement rates that are coming from insurance companies have made it so unattractive that a lot of psychiatrists aren't even applying to be providers, with different insurers. So therefore, you're left with paying out of pocket, which is difficult. Even as a family member with resources to be able to help a family member. I can't imagine for those without resources, but even then, has the world kind of expanded even in terms of who can, write psych meds or, be on a psychiatrist? Does that make access easier? I mean, are you finding that in terms of medication management resources that world is the same, worse, better? That's a lot.
I wish I had good news, but honestly, psychiatry and finding a psychiatrist can be a challenge. Seeing that the Sydney app connects Dayton City employees with a psychiatrist, I was really excited to see that, because just what you were experiencing is very real. It's very real. And trying to find a private provider who's a psychiatrist can be very challenging. They can be picky on what insurances they accept. Anthem, luckily, is often a common insurance that is accepted, so that's nice. And because there's such a need, what people are running into is like, hey, even though they take my insurance, they're just not taking new patients. And that's just a hard reality of what is, and I wish I had better news on that. Sometimes you can speak to your primary care physician. Certain primary care physicians are more comfortable prescribing psychotropic medications than others. Some are like, hey, I'll deal with a more mild psychotropic like a Prozac or a Zoloft. Than they are with something that requires more specialized training, like, lithium or Depakote. So if it's something maybe a little bit more, not quite as intense, you might want to try talking with your primary care physician. If they don't prescribe psychotropics, or if what that person is struggling with requires more expertise, sometimes that PCP can refer you to some psychiatrists that they work alongside. So that might be an option. And then other times, and I wish I had something else to say, but it really is like looking in the system, cold calling, looking what people find. Do you have any openings? It can be really hard. We have many psychiatrists here at Samaritan Behavioral Health. Luckily, we were just able to hire another psychiatric nurse practitioner, because prior to that, we had a wait list of about 30 patients, and we're down to 4. So that's great, which we usually get people in within about 2 to 3 weeks.
So can psychiatric nurse practitioners write the same scripts as a actual MD psychiatrist?
Yes. So that's an option too. You can always look for a psychiatric nurse practitioner. They have specialized training in psychotropic medication and providing that. And they're also supervised by, and I hope this is my understanding, I might be misspeaking, but my understanding is a psychiatric nurse practitioner receives, there's a specific word for it, and my brain is flatlining. Like, it's a supervision by a psychiatrist, just as a double safety, that the right things are being done.
Thank you, Norma. Does anybody else have any questions? I didn't see anything else pop in the chat box.
I just have a general.
Okay.
Can you help me distinguish the difference between psychologists and psychiatrists?
Yes, I love that question. Thank you. Absolutely. So the psychologist focus is on treating mental illness through sessions, utilizing interventions. They, DBT, CBT, all blah, 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 all the letters. So their focus is on relationship and treating it one-on-one without medication. A psychiatrist, the one with the I in the name, they prescribe the medication. So a psychiatrist session is going to be very different. You're not going to be sitting down and really processing, and the sessions, a psychiatrist session is normally like 15 minutes. It's more of kind of like a doctor session. How are your symptoms? This is the medication, any side effects, progress. A psychiatrist often is very connected in the work with the psychologist. My own belief through my education and research, therapy with medication is going to be most effective, or you don't often have to also have medication. Basically, I don't recommend just medication, because somebody who's just receiving medication isn't going to have as effective treatment as if they saw a licensed therapist or a psychologist, because there's more to a person's struggle than, just that a pill can solve. So yeah, the psychiatrist is the one that can prescribe. The psychologist is that longer session that's really processing and working through behavior changes and lifestyle changes, relational changes, all of that stuff.
Got it. Thank you.
Yes.
Do we have anyone else that would like to ask some questions? Have a couple more minutes before we wrap up. Anyone? Going
I
on?
do.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Sorry. So Cynthia, can you kind of talk about, because just based on my own experience, and again, I have a member of my family that has mental illness, how, where, even in terms of the structure of Samaritan Health, where a social worker kind of becomes a part of the care team, because there are other issues that just affect the life of
Oh, yes.
the mentally ill, as well as the families of the mentally ill, where a social worker is needed. So you have your psychologists, or your counselors, that can help you through the therapy. You have your psychiatrist that can help, or your nurse practitioner that can help with the medication management. But then there are issues about jobs, because a lot of times with the mentally ill, they may not be consistent in keeping a job or have housing issues, and you kind of need what I've learned the term wraparound support.
Yeah.
So can you talk about that?
Yeah. So, I feel like I'm just going to make things more complicated here. Social workers that is a large, big umbrella term. There are different types of social workers. So you have some social workers that are really focused on connection to resources and helping families and those struggling with mental illness connect to resources, or facilitating job placements, housing. That's where we kind of get into this role of case management, where people can be assigned to somebody's case and they're working alongside, especially those who maybe have a diagnosis of a severe and persistent mental illness, where they need more help with their day-to-day living activities, help securing housing and jobs, grocery shopping, all of that. That's where a case manager might not necessarily be a social worker, but they can be. The social workers can also have a clinical focus. So sometimes you might see credentials of people being a licensed social worker, and they're providing therapy because as they went through their social work program, if they continued and they went on to their graduate degree in social work with a clinical focus, then they're also providing specific clinical work on a one-on-one setting in a therapeutic sense. So credentialing opens up a whole new thing. So you might see licensed professional counselor, licensed professional clinical counselor, licensed social worker, licensed independent social worker. So I think when you're, looking at a provider, that's where it's really helpful to recognize, like, what is it that you treat? And usually you can ask, like, what do you specialize in? What do you treat? They might have a profile. If they're with an agency and you're assigned a therapist, that's going to be a master's level trained therapist or a psychologist who has a doctorate degree. But a social worker, like I said, can also be a part of like the wraparound programs or case management. And that social worker, if they don't have a clinical focus, might be more focused on facilitating connection to resources and people fulfilling more of their day-to-day type of tasks. Did I answer that question? Okay. There's a lot under social work.
Well, thank you so much, Cynthia, for coming and actually giving us an overview of mental. The last month we were doing breathing exercises. This month we kind of get into the education part of mental wellness. So we do appreciate you for coming out. We do very much so.
Thank you for having me. And I just want to say just one last time, if you are struggling, please don't hesitate to reach out, because you're not alone. So.